Those of you just joining, we're just giving a few minutes, rather another 30 seconds or so for folks to join.
All right, we've got the green light, Julia.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today to discuss this historic climate victory against the Ontario government. My name is Julia Kroom. I'm the Director of Litigation Practice at EcoJustice, Canada's largest environmental law charity, and I'm one of the lawyers for the youth applicants on this case. I'll be moderating the press conference this afternoon. I'm joining you from the traditional territories of several First Nations, the Huron-Wendat, the Anishinaabeg, the Haudenosaunee, the Chippewas, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. We have 5 speakers today, including representatives from EcoJustice, Stockwoods LLP, and the youth applicants at the helm of this landmark victory. Each speaker will share some words today on today's landmark decision from the Court of Appeal. We'll hear about both the practical and legal implications of this case, and we'll also hear directly from 3 of the young leaders at the forefront of this case on the significance of the court's decision in their lives. We'll then move into the question period. A few housekeeping items before we begin. Please change your Zoom name to include your name and outlet, which will help us take questions and follow up with you after the call. Throughout the conference, please send your questions through the Zoom Q&A feature. After our speaker remarks, I'll be fielding them and aim to get through as many as possible. If you have any technical difficulties, please reach out to EcoJustice Events in the Zoom chat for support. Lastly, in addition to the members of the media joining us on today's call, we also have folks from across the country tuning in on Facebook Live, and we welcome you all. With that, we're ready to hear from some of the individuals behind this case. First up, Fraser Thompson from EcoJustice.
Thank you, Julia. Good afternoon. My name is Fraser Thompson, and I'm the Climate Director with EcoJustice. Today, for the first time, the highest court in Ontario has ruled that a government's climate actions are subject to the Charter. This is an important win for our clients and for climate action in Canada. By confirming that the Charter applies to Ontario's inadequate target, and that Ontario's failure to act on climate change is risking the lives and well-being of its citizens, this ruling boxes Ontario in a corner. While the court didn't go as far as ordering the province to set a science-based target, the decision brings us one giant step closer to ensuring that Ontario answers for its inadequate climate action. This is the latest development in a 5-year journey. In November of 2019, our clients launched this groundbreaking charter case. The case challenged the Ontario government's fueling of the climate crisis. Despite the scientific consensus that climate change poses an existential threat to the health and well-being of its citizens, Ontario had gutted its previous climate legislation and replaced it with a completely inadequate emissions target. This single action, if allowed to stand, is set to enable an extra 200 million tons of dangerous carbon pollution, and it has aligned Ontario's emissions with a catastrophic level of warming. Ontario's actions are sadly emblematic of how our leaders have failed humanity. For the last 30 years, politicians and governments around the world have delayed action, deceived the public, and fueled the climate crisis. The consequences of these failures play out almost daily, with severe heat waves, catastrophic storms, and out-of-control wildfires. This is the perilous future the youth of today, and especially Indigenous youth, face. It would be easy to lose hope. But in bringing this case forward, our 7 youth clients, Alex, Beezy, Maddie, Shay, Shelby, Sophia, and Zoe, believed that this planet and our future is worth fighting for. They didn't want to let politicians trample over their rights and throw away their future. They chose hope over fear and action over acquiescence. And they believed that despite the odds and despite government cynicism, that justice would prevail. Today, Ontario's highest court has granted their appeal. The court has affirmed the lower court findings and what the science has been saying for years. When governments fuel the climate crisis, they put our lives and health at risk. In addition to ordering a new hearing, the Court of Appeal has simplified the legal issues and put our clients on the right footing for a victory at this follow-up hearing. This ruling also shines a light directly on Ontario's inadequate target and confirms that Ontario must conduct its climate response in accordance with the high standards of the Charter. And our clients aim to push ahead with a new hearing as quickly as possible. The Ontario Court of Appeal's findings are consistent with a growing chorus of judges around the world, in Germany, the Netherlands, and Colombia, to name a few, who are increasingly ruling in favor of citizen-led climate cases and ordering governments to address this threat. This landmark moment for climate action would not have been possible without the 7 youth at the helm of this case. They've overcome government attempts to strike their case, and they've forged ahead after it was dismissed by a lower court. They're an example for all of us that our future is worth fighting for. And before I end, just on a personal note, I'm incredibly proud to have represented the 7 youth in this case. Their victory is a historic moment in the global fight against climate change, and I hope will act as a beacon for everyone who believes that a better world is possible.
Thank you, Fraser. Next, it's my honor to introduce you to 3 of those youth applicants who are the reason we are here today. Sophia Mathur, BZ Gray, and Madison Dyke will share why they launched this case and what today's victory means to them. Starting with you, Sophia.
Hi, my name is Sophia Mathur. I joined this case because the climate crisis is going to impact everyone, both now and into the future. It is important for me to be a part of this case because we need to stand up for the generations to come and make sure that they have a safe and livable planet. I have seen with my own eyes the dangers of extreme weather, the kind we can expect more of with climate change. In the winter of 2019, my home in the city of Sudbury was walloped by record snowfalls and rapid thawing and freezing cycles. We had to evacuate our home and rebuild our roof and walls after they buckled under a meter of ice and snow. For 6 months, we had to live in a hotel. I believe that our case can make a real difference for young people in Canada and put Ontario back on track to take real climate action and start working for a safer future. Our win today shows that our voices and concerns matter. I am proud to be a part of a global movement of young people who are speaking truth to power and holding their political leaders to account for failing to act on and actively contributing to the climate crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. Up next, we have remarks from BZ.
Bonjour, BZ Gray and Dishakas. My name is BZ. My home is Amjanong First Nation, where the St. Clair River meets Lake Huron. It is also beside Ontario's Chemical Valley, where Canada's largest concentration of fossil fuel industry refineries have impacted the health and well-being of my community. I've witnessed firsthand the devastation caused by the fossil fuel industry. I have grown up worried about the impact of these fossil fuel refineries on my health and the health of my community. I've experienced environmental racism firsthand. The impacts of the refineries show up in foods and plants, and restricting my community's access to traditional food sources and causing havoc on the lives of Indigenous people. The impact of fossil fuels on my traditional lands has given me a perspective of the harm caused by emissions from this industry in Ontario and around the world. This is a big movement for climate action. I hope our victory inspires other young people to continue to speak out about the climate crisis and use the courts to fight for a sustainable future for all.
Thank you, BZ. Now we'll hear from Madison.
Hi, my name is Madison Dyke. I've joined this case because of my deep love and awe for where I've grown up in Northern Ontario, in between Lake Superior and the surrounding boreal forest. Both of these are truly remarkable, and equally so are the changes I've witnessed as a result of the changing climate. Lake Superior has had a shocking reduction in ice cover, something that impacts how my community is able to use the lake, how I'm able to skate on the ice when it's come wintertime, and also how fish are spawning and the habitat that they need. The erratic weather in Northern Ontario, from dramatic heat waves, it has been one of the hottest Septembers I've ever remembered, to torrential rain, has all impacted our local food systems. As somebody with many friends who are farmers and I try and grow a lot of food, it is really noticed. And the lack of blueberries is not only noticed by me, but the black bears as well. Wild food systems are also deeply impacted. This case is, just so important to me and for speaking for everyone else who doesn't have a voice. And as somebody who works in forestry, and I'm really fortunate to experience wild places across this province and country, and have seen forests all across the country, and the effects of this rapidly changing climate are truly undeniable. This case is about my future, and it's about the future of my grandchildren, and really thinking forward to also the forest stands and the lake and what this will look like in 100 years. I continue to be honored to be a part of this case, and I continue to be hopeful that this victory puts governments across the country on notice that they can't away with continuing to fuel the climate crisis, and that young people will stop at nothing. Thank you.
Thank you, Maddie. Next up is Nader Hassan of Stockwoods LLP. Nader is lead counsel on this case, seasoned constitutional litigator, and recognized as one of the best appellate litigators in Canada. Nader.
Thanks, Julia. This is an important day for climate justice. It's an important day for government accountability, and the fight goes on. Today, the Ontario Court of Appeal, as you've heard, has allowed our appeal. This matter, this case, is now going back to the trial court for a further rehearing on the merits of the case. As you may recall, an earlier decision of the Superior Court had dismissed our constitutional challenge on legal grounds, despite having accepted all of our evidence, including all of our expert evidence on climate change. The Court of Appeal held today that the trial court made a number of legal errors. It has now provided considerable guidance to the trial courts on how this charter challenge should be adjudicated. And most importantly, Ontario's highest court made it clear that government conduct as it relates to climate change is subject to judicial scrutiny and can be reviewed by the courts. And specifically that an emissions target, including an inadequate emissions target, is subject to the charter. Now, this was a sharp rebuke to the government of Ontario. Ontario did not put up a fight when it came to the evidence. It hasn't denied the scientific reality of climate change, nor could it. Instead, Ontario's position has essentially always been that even though climate change is real, even though it's catastrophic, even though it's a threat to all of us, Ontario should nonetheless be immune from judicial scrutiny when it comes to its actions on climate change. Ontario believes it should be permitted to exacerbate the climate crisis with impunity. Now, today, the Ontario Court of Appeal rejected that cynical approach. So with today's decision, the focus now shifts back to the facts and the sad catastrophic reality of rising global temperatures, increasing heat waves, hurricanes, forest fires, and other extreme climate events. But our 7 courageous clients are ready to keep fighting. We're ready to keep fighting alongside them. The stakes are just too high to do anything else. Thank you.
Thank you, Nader. With that rousing finish, that concludes the remarks from our speakers. We'll now open the floor up for questions that were submitted in the Zoom Q&A feature. So I will start with a question for the clients. Perhaps, Sophia, if I could send this to you. The question is, what is your message to other young people who are concerned about the climate crisis?
Well, you're never too young to start. You're never too young to say something. I think a lot of youth out there can't vote, but we have to be reminded that politicians work for us, and they have to protect us. They have to make sure that we have a safe future. So even if you can't go out there and sue the government, you can speak out, you can join organizations, and you can stay informed. Keep your parents informed and the people in your life informed about what's going on, and remember that you have the power. And that's all that I started with, and look at where I am now. Look at where all the other young people in this case are now. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sophia. This next question I'll direct to you, Nader, from Jessica Mack. What are the next steps for the appellants?
So we want to get back in front of the trial court as quickly as possible. That's what the Court of Appeal has directed, and that's what we want to do. The evidence is jarring, it's alarming, it speaks to a catastrophic climate crisis that's only getting worse. We now think that the trial courts have all the tools they could possibly need and a little bit of added direction from the Court of Appeal to adjudicate this matter. So we're asking to go back to the trial court immediately and for the trial court to grant a remedy ordering Ontario to bring its its greenhouse gas emissions targets in line, at a minimum in line with the Paris standards, and in line with best practices and an emissions target that sets us not on a course to climate disaster.
Thank you, Nader. And if there's any follow-up questions, please do just pop them in the Q&A and I'll be able to find them there. Fraser, if I could direct this one to you. You've said this is a landmark case. Can you explain a little bit more how so?
Absolutely. So for the first time, Ontario's highest court is confirming that by fueling the climate crisis, politicians are risking the lives and well-being of Ontarians. This decision also confirms that government conduct, a climate target, fueling of the climate crisis, is subject to the Charter. And so really this decision puts all governments on notice that they cannot continue to put our lives at risk without risking similar lawsuits under the Charter. And so today's decision is a landmark ruling because it clarifies the law and it allows our case to proceed and other cases as well.
So we've seen a couple of people raise their hands. If you wouldn't mind, please just typing it into the Q&A function. That's how we've got it set up for this webinar. While you do that, I'll ask another question over to Maddie this time. Why do you think young people are often at the forefront of the climate movement and so many cases like this around the world?
I feel grateful to have a voice and to have a platform to use this voice as a young person. But I also often feel frustrated that young people are in this position at all. There's a part of me that wishes that the other litigants who were younger than me when we started, that they didn't have this responsibility and that they could just be playing and be youthful and enjoy the world outside around them. But unfortunately, that hasn't been the case. And I hope that it's because that we see a different world as possible, and that we maybe are hopeful and just painfully optimistic, but also perhaps just desperate and aware of what the future possibly could hold.
Thanks, Maddie. I have a question for Nodder. I think this is CP Jordan Olmsted. How quickly can you realistically get a new hearing before the trial court?
I mean, we're going to ask for the earliest possible hearing, and at that point, it's a function of how quickly the court will accommodate us. So I'll probably have a better answer to that question in a couple of days, because we're going to make the ask immediately.
Beezy, I'm going to put you in the hot seat for a minute. What has being part of this case meant to you?
I think it has been to me that you can go into something that feels really like hard and challenging, like a court case. Like it's just not language that I'm used to or knowing, like as someone who's not a lawyer, as just like a youth applicant. And I think also that like in ways that like Indigenous law can be seen or heard, like through this case, I feel like it felt really important to me to represent 7 generations, and that can mean 7 generations previously and 7 generations ahead. So that felt like really strong in like trying to apply like Indigenous law, but like feeling seen like in a Canadian courtroom and court case.
Thank you, Beezy. So I'm not seeing any other questions in the Q&A. Just a quick pause to make sure. Stick your hand up. I think with that, we'll be wrapping up the press conference for today. Thank you for joining us as we celebrate this landmark case. I see one more pop up. Actually, I'm going to interrupt myself. We have a question from Benjamin Shingler. And this one, no worries about the slow typing. I completely understand. The question is, from Benjamin with CBC, I'm wondering about the implications this has at the federal level from a political and also legal level. And do you think that the federal government will intervene? So maybe I'll start with Nodder on that one. Fraser, you might have something to add.
Well, I am hopeful, and I expect that this case will serve as a blueprint for other charter challenges, challenging government action and inaction as it relates to climate change across the country. Ontario, from the very beginning, has been trying to erect legal hurdle after legal hurdle, legal technicality after legal technicality. And one by one, the dominoes have fallen for Ontario. And now they have to meet us on the science and the evidence where they know they are weak, because climate change is a reality and the science backs that up. And Ontario knows this. And so I expect all governments across the country to take note of this. And I'm hopeful that this case will serve as a blueprint for further legal action across the country.
Fraser, you're not unmuting, so I'm taking that to mean you have nothing to add to that rather perfect answer. Thank you. Okay. With that, I will now close out the session for today. We've shared a link to our press release in the chat, and we'll circulate this recording to all those who registered. For any additional media inquiries, please don't hesitate to reach out to Kari at EcoJustice. Her email is there in the chat. Thank you again to our speakers and all of you who attended.